Today's Taiwan problem is more than just a historic dispute about sovereignty. It is the hub of a wider conflict between democratic and authoritarian aspirations, between U.S.-led international norms and Chinese visions of regional hegemony. The historical foundations of the Taiwan crisis. The origins of the Taiwan crisis must be traced back to the conclusion of World War II, when Japan surrendered Taiwan to the Republic of China, ROC, in 1945. But shortly thereafter, the politics of China changed overnight. Following the defeat of the nationalists in the Chinese Civil War by the Communists, Chiang Kai-shek and his government escaped to Taiwan in 1949 and set up the ROC there. The Communist Party, on the other hand, established the People's Republic of China, PRC, on the mainland. Two competing Chinese governments now claimed authority over the same country, each ruling from Beijing and Taipei, respectively. This unfrozen tension soon resolved into overt hostility. In the 1950s, the PRC bombarded Taiwan-held offshore islands, prompting the First and Second Taiwan Strait crises. The U.S. countered, wanting to prevent the extension of communism in Asia by sending its 7th Fleet to the area and signing a mutual defense treaty with the ROC in 1954. Although these crises fell short of war, they highlighted Taiwan's importance to the U.S. in the Cold War. By the late, the Sino-Soviet War allowed the USA to step in with a China policy to counter the Soviet Union. The United States was able to reframe its China policy as a result of the Sino-Soviet split. Washington started a covert diplomatic outreach to Beijing. President Nixon's historic trip to China in 1972 accepted the idea of One China through the Shanghai Communique, acknowledging that Taiwan was a part of China but not formally recognizing Beijing's claim to the island's sovereignty. A significant reorientation was indicated at the same time when the United States started reducing its military presence in Taiwan. President Jimmy Carter formally acknowledged the People's Republic of China as the only legitimate government of China in 1979. This meant cutting formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, but the U.S. signed the Taiwan Relations Act, TRA, to not isolate its long-term ally. The TRA retained the United States' promise of Taiwan's self-defense, which enabled ongoing arms sales and unofficial political, economic, and cultural ties. In the decades that followed, China began to rise. By the early 21st century, it had transformed into a global economic powerhouse with growing military capabilities and renewed determination to reunify Taiwan with the mainland. Beijing's line was toughened under Xi Jinping, who on multiple occasions asserted that reunification was inevitable by force, if not voluntarily. Taiwan as a global economy. At the center of this geopolitical confrontation is Taiwan's growing strategic significance. Most critical of all its contributions to the global system is technological. Taiwan's chip industry. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC alone, manufactures more than 60% of the world's high-end chips, critical to smartphones and vehicles as well as military systems and artificial intelligence. This centrality was re-emphasized in May of 2025, when Taiwan's exports skyrocketed to more than $51 billion despite increasing U.S. tariffs. The increase was triggered mainly by global demand for AI chips, which continue to be the keystone of emerging technologies. As global powers compete to capture artificial intelligence, space, and next-gen warfare, Taiwan's semiconductor supply chains have become a point of leverage, economic, military, and political. The threats to Taiwan. Today, Beijing acts under the so-called Davidson Window, 2021 to 2027, when China might reach the military capability to forcibly reunify Taiwan. Recent PLA assertiveness, from fighter jet incursions, naval provocation, cyber attacks, and submarine cable interference signals Chinese intervention. Taiwan's export controls are strangling China's AI chip requirements. Although Russia's deal with China to procure semiconductor chips after the EU blocked the exports to Russia in 2021 was a major trade boost to China. But China cannot meet the complete quota of the chips to export to Russia. It has to buy them from Taiwan and then export to Russia. This lag in the trade is what China wants to eliminate. In addition, China's own AI capability due to blockage of NVIDIA chips and processors can only be bypassed once it has complete control over Taiwanese industry. The international conflicts. The war over Ukraine cemented a China-Russia axis, fueling arms, nuclear technology, and diplomatic cooperation. This partnership strengthens Beijing, which has a chance to probe Western determination with Taiwan as the next point of leverage. Beijing's reserved approach in Gaza is part of its global balancing act. Regional unrest preoccupies the West, lessening effective attention to East Asia, particularly in the wake of the Iran-Israel war. Likewise, in the Southeast, India and Pakistan's recent incursions and threat of a nuclear confrontation have brought the USA's focus more on this hostile region. The fall of Taiwan in 2026. To acquire Taiwan by next year, China will begin military coercion slowly and covertly. The PLA would increase warships and fighter planes around Taiwan, accompanied by cyber attacks on Taiwan's electricity grid, financial institutions, and its most important semiconductor firm, TSMC. China would also increase trade and political constraints to strangle the economy of Taiwan and cut Taiwan off from the rest of the world's allies. These actions would deplete Taiwan's defenses and stress to which the United States and its allies will venture to intervene. President Trump, now in power, would probably hold back. Congress would insist on support under the Taiwan Relations Act, but Trump's priority on tariffs and trade, already demonstrated by the 32% tariff on most Taiwanese imports, might lead him to hold back. His government has taken a transactional route, backing defense for Taiwan with policy and deliveries, but cautioning Taipei not to depend too heavily, while also opening up trade with Beijing. This hesitation would give China time to build momentum. China would then initiate a coordinated attack in a variety of ways. It would attack Taiwan's communications and satellite links with space-based jamming, disable ports and industry with cyber attacks, and ring Taiwan with A2/AD missile systems to deny foreign navies access. This multi-domain campaign would develop gradually at first without an open declaration of war to taunt defenses around the world. As global attention is distracted elsewhere on wars in Europe, the Middle East, or South Asia, China could initiate an amphibious assault or naval blockade. Posing as a reunification campaign, the PLA would rapidly capture airfields, ports, and chip factories. U.S. warships would have time to mobilize only after China has expelled or bullied Taiwan's leaders and established a pro-Beijing regime in Taipei. Aftermath and regional reactions. Once China occupies Taiwan, we will get to see some drastic changes in the region. Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines would all increase their defense spending and procurement. Countries would have to choose between sticking with the United States or leaning toward China. They would have to assume greater responsibility for their security since their faith in American protection would be shattered. The balance of power would change on a global scale. In Asia, the United States would lose vital influence. China and Russia will form a major bloc opposing the USA, inviting other states to join out of necessity or fear. Even the EU would face a severe dilemma since the USA's backing out of NATO and the EU's limited defense spending. It would have to ally itself with China and accept Russia's renewed expansionism in Europe. Or it would start rebuilding its defense industry, which would significantly affect Europe's welfare spending and economy. But one thing is for sure. The loss of Taiwan would end American superiority as a superpower. Economic impact and tech crisis. Taiwan's collapse would cause a massive global recession. Because TSMC produces 2/3 of the world's high-tech chips, all industries around the globe, automobiles, computers, defense, would experience shortages. In retaliation, the US, EU, Japan, and others would attempt to create their own chip facilities, but that would take years to happen. In the meantime, China would dominate Taiwan's chip factories, so it would wield enormous influence over world technology, trade, and global economic spheres. Trade would be divided into two groups, one led by the US and its allies, and the other led by China and Russia. Sanctions would be more severe, and both would develop their supply chains. The impact would be more severe on the USA, such as de-dollarization of the economy, the end of globalism, and the rise of regionalism, as organizations such as the SCO and BRICS would become much more powerful. The banking system might change forever as well, with banks relying more on CIPS as compared to the SWIFT system of the USA. Could this spark World War III? The capture of Taiwan might ignite a larger war. If the US military attempts to prevent China, or if China attacks American vessels, it will result in a confrontation. This fight may escalate to cyber and space. With numerous nations and nuclear powers involved, it will turn into a full-blown World War III with far-reaching impacts on human beings. A new bipolar world, increased military tension, fragmented trade spheres, and a possibly long-lasting global depression fueled by supply chain breakdown. Should Taiwan collapse next year, it will not be an isolated incident. It will be the aggregate of strategic intention, technology warfare, and American policy errors. The world would become a more hostile place, with crises in almost every corner of the world, broken, bipolar, and unstable. We would not only witness the beginning of another Cold War-like era, but we might have to bear another world war for which the world is too vulnerable now.